Hello and welcome to Leadership Within, the moment for leaders to reflect on their human experience of leadership. I'm Vanessa May and I'm joined by...
myself, TK. Hey.
I was going to say good morning, but it's actually just turned afternoon, hasn't it?
I know, right? But, you never know. Well, it's the moment people are listening to it. I usually release these wonderful episodes on Sunday morning, so it might be morning for many people.
Okay, so good morning to everyone that's listening. Yes. So today, I thought it would be interesting for us to talk about something that's been coming up for me in yoga. And thank you for the prompt, TK, on that. So one of the things that I am exploring in my yoga practice is this intersection between strength and flexibility. And the idea that if we have too much strength, we become rigid. And if we have too much flexibility without strength, we're kind of shape-shifting, adapting,
okay.
And we can't hold. So I kind of think about that in relationship to leadership. And how does that show up for me in leadership? And I noticed that I was in a conversation with somebody yesterday, and they were describing how they were feeling. They were feeling on their own. And my natural inclination would be to flex into that and to go help and go, probably, if I'm honest, rescue. And because I can feel what's wanted, what's needed, I can feel the vulnerability of it. And, there's a part of me that doesn't like the comfort, or the discomfort of that. And I want to help this person.
Okay, yeah.
And in a way, they're asking for help, but they're not asking the right people for the help that they need. And so I can see how I could go in and so, but there would be an impact for me. And the impact would be, I'd be doing that work for free. And that's been a very common trap for me. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I'll just jump in and help. And then I'll, question myself afterwards, like, why did you do that? You had really important priorities for yourself. So this, in that moment, the strength for me to practice is staying in my lane and letting that person find what they need for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard, right? Because I need to not be over flexible in that moment and just kind of, okay.
So this is you standing in the situation, the posture, the mindset of strength, isn't it?
Yes. So, and knowing that my habit is to just flex and drop whatever is needed for me because I can see someone's struggling.
It's an interesting perspective in terms of when, we started, and you've said this about this dichotomy of strength and flexibility. I had a very different situation in mind, right? Because when, I've not had many adventures with yoga. I remember I went at one point, and it was a beginner's class, and the main association for me was unfortunately pain. Not that, I have mobility problems, but I thought, was it really beginner's class? But the one thing that struck me here is the notion of flexing, which is yielding and helping, right? Despite the fact that you maybe had other things in mind. Your instincts were to help. But on the other hand, you've said that, doing it for free may not be appropriate. Now, the interesting thing for me is it really flexibility, right? Because one would say that going with your instincts, going with your natural, way of showing up, which is, to have empathy and help, is it really flexing into a different posture, right? What I think about when I think about, let's say, high-level professional yoga is people that are being extremely flexible and dare I say, contort their bodies into situations and asanas that I would normally not associate with something that a human body can do, which, we should be more flexible. But interestingly, your example is more about less flexing, more following the natural instinct, rhythm, flow of what you usually do,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. So I know that in this
Mm.
situation, and it's weird, isn't it? Because I'm
Yeah.
kind of relating something physical with something
Oh, but it's not
a
weird.
behavior that I do in
We all
leadership.
live in our bodies, don't we?
Well, hopefully. I have a bit of a habit of going into my head a
Mhm.
lot. But I think in this situation, I'm very aware that my growing edge is to really stay, excuse me, focused in my lane,
Mhm.
and to really notice when I overgive, over empathize, over, like I can be that emotional barometer in a room, and then want harmony. A part of me will want harmony.
Mm.
So it's like, okay, I can get into other people's business. So in this situation, if I do that,
Yeah.
I might rectify the immediate need.
Mhm.
But actually, that person won't learn what they need to learn. And I can really feel that they've got a lesson in this. And, I would be um, covering someone else that I think should be stepping in. There's a conversation that needs to happen,
Mhm.
and it's not with me, and it's not my issue, and it's not my agenda. And I can feel myself being pulled into it. I
Uh-huh.
have a role. I have a role in this, to play, and it's not the particular role that I'm just about to jump into because I feel the discomfort. So it's interesting because you mentioned pain. And I think the thing that I learned through my yoga the most is how do I distinguish between real pain, like my body does not want to contort into this, or
Mhm.
I do really not want to be in this place, versus discomfort, which is actually, it should be uncomfortable because, I'm stretching, the muscles are doing something that they're not used to doing. So what I'm saying in this situation is my muscle is used to jumping in and, resolving the
Yes.
tension. And I'm really trying hard to not do that.
So I'm looking at it, and that's a great example. I'm looking at it from, I'm interpreting it slightly differently. And obviously, we all will have our own interpretations of this situation. So the way I think about it is that when a difficult interaction happens or a situation, as a leader and even as a human being, we have a choice. Either we uh, immediately, I believe, there is an instinct we might have to do
Mm,
something, to make sure that, something is resolved. Our natural reaction in this case is to do something, whether it is to help, to step back, to hide, run, fight, whatever it might be, whoever we are. Sometimes it might be something that will require a significant effort going against the strength. So this is what I associate against the grain, associate with strength, which is keep to your values, keep to your, the thing that you believe is the right thing to do, even though it might cause discomfort to you and others. You are strong in this position. Whereas flexibility is to change your natural reaction and do something despite yourself. Flex into a different way of showing up, a different position that, you gain this ability through practice, through flexing, through hopefully unblocking the joints and everything. So you can change the way you show up.
yeah.
So that's,
Yeah.
and it also can be quite uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, so I noticed it was really
Hmm.
interesting because I noticed that I started to feel this pattern that I often feel, which is frustration,
Yes.
and then I can start to feel resentment. So
Hmm.
so the frustration is kind of like, this shouldn't be like this. This should be clear. We should have, an agenda. We should know exactly what our roles are going in. So my perfectionist
Hmm.
has this thing that can judge it and say it shouldn't be this way, and then I can kind of go, you should be doing X, Y, and Z. I can see that's not happening. Okay, I'm going to step in and do it. And that pattern is a pattern that I've run in many aspects of my life, at work, at
Hmm.
home. And so I can feel the frustration. And I think, I now have the awareness to go, oh, I'm at a choice point. I can go into that frustration and go, oh, well, I'll just have to go in and,
Hmm.
help and
Follow the
give my
natural
time. And
course of action that you've
exactly,
usually done. Yeah.
exactly. Or I can kind of go, okay, like I'm not going to run a pattern of futility.
Hmm.
Instead, I'm going to breathe, notice what's happening, question if this is this mine and is this my role to solve, and then actually stay firm in my role here and what my boundaries are. And that's so different for me to because it's like, so often I can have very porous boundaries. So this feels very rigid for me and it feels deeply uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And I know that by me staying in my role and holding, the boundaries of that role and what I'm paid to do actually will will create a space for something else to happen.
And that's, I think, wonderful, but also, there's so many perspectives and points of view on that. And I believe that you've mentioned something amazing, which is, having this moment to make a decision. You said question yourself. And I totally, agree and practice it as much as I can. But the challenge I often have is if you start questioning yourself, you can question your own questioning. Theoretically, the reflection may never stop. Every choice will be the one, that's burdened and tainted with risk. And
Yes.
there's no clear-cut answer most of the time. Life isn't an exact science. So for me, in this moment, when quite often action is needed and people look up to me for leadership, it's an interesting one to be able to question yourself, but in a way that you come up with an answer that you're satisfied and not continue with doubt. That's a big one
Yes.
for me, really, because, the as much as I develop this ability to flex, there's a decision to flex. And sometimes, it can be confusing and difficult.
Yeah. So how have you learned to work with that doubt that shows up at that edge, that choice point?
Well, the interesting thing is, and I'm hoping that our listeners can, draw some inspiration from it, is when this moment happens and this choice point breeds doubt because of questioning myself for the right reasons, I'm exploring an option if I can give it time. The time that would allow me to change my perspective. In fact, quite often you can. Not all decisions need to be made on the spot. I, unfortunately, I don't know, have been conditioned to make decisions quickly. Maybe because I'm impatient, however, want to play that. But the thing is, um, what I found very effective is to give myself space to decide to question myself in a way that will not overburden me with unnecessary doubt, but will give me the time to change perspective. Of course, it isn't always possible, but what I found is that it is feasible in more ways than I thought would be.
Mm, So in terms of yoga, I think that would be breathing, giving some wiggle room into the asana. Do you know what I mean? It's like that's what I'm hearing you say. It's like, okay, I know there's a choice point. Can I give myself the space to ask, to question and check in with
Oh,
myself,
yeah.
but not over question and then trust the intuition that comes up?
Well, that's a very good example because it's a field that I feel a bit uncomfortable with, as in exposing. As I said, my story with yoga, and the fact that some of the asanas felt quite difficult for me. Physically, what happened is because everyone was doing it, so I thought, well, that's the thing to do. I did not necessarily
Yeah.
give myself the permission to say, "Oh, can I get these blocks or whatever it's called?" So it's a bit easier because this
Yeah.
particular thing seems to be difficult in my build to be able to do that. I did not, and possibly that's the way to go through it. At that point, years and years ago, I don't know what it was, 2012 or something. I thought, well, maybe I need to suffer through the pain. In silence,
Mm.
groaning that, on this particular asana. But maybe the decision I should have made is to say, well, maybe this particular thing isn't for me, this particular pattern of asanas.
Yeah, well, so I'm hearing, you're really speaking my language now, because one of the biggest lessons that I've learned with the teacher that I currently have
Hmm.
is to use props all over the place, right? And to also know your own body. So the problem with yoga is that we're all looking out to everybody else and kind of going, oh, can
Oh,
I do
yeah,
that?
it's a group,
Like
if it
this is
is,
what this
right?
shape
Yeah.
should look like, right? But
Mhm.
what we're not doing is staying in our own body and going, oh, this is either uncomfortable or painful. Which one is it? And what will support me to hold my version of this as best I can. And I think, that's exactly what we're talking about here, isn't it? It's like really knowing yourself as a leader and knowing, what is truthful for you, and also what is the thing that you do that's kind of protective, that,
Mm.
I'm saying I rescue. Like I know that, and I can people please, I can do all those things, I can overgive. So therefore I know there's a truth at this edge for me about holding that within the confines or the boundaries of the role that I am being paid for. And, and that's deeply uncomfortable for me, because almost like I'm feeling someone else struggle.
Mm. And for me, the impatience, the time whenever I'm facilitating or doing anything, being able to resist the urge to do things quicker or make a snap decision. Yeah, feels, I can't say equally because there's no way to measure or compare, but also feels like something that yeah, it's deeply uncomfortable not to do. But the interesting thing is with both of these examples, I think, Vanessa, is that we're conscious that it happens.
Yes.
And that allows us to reflect and expect it.
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
many leaders, if you are conscious about your own biases, your own preferred ways, you can make this choice. And if it's something that happens unconsciously, the choice isn't available for you.
Yeah. And I'm noticing, so I'm looking at a screen at the moment
Hmm.
that has, you know, what we talk about, which is the
Hmm.
moment for leaders to reflect on their human experience of leadership. And that's exactly what we're doing in this conversation. And that's exactly what we're inviting leaders into, is that actually, how do you build reflection into your leadership so that when you have situations like this where oh, I'm going to do that instinctive thing that just, isn't actually terribly helpful, that you create that pause, that
Yeah.
moment of reflection.
It's a big one, right? And the way I personally found to do that is, well, it's actually quite directly touching or rubbing or scratching on the edge that I have, which is impatience, right? How can you reflect if you're impatient? Oh, it's nearly impossible. And I managed, right? I managed to say, um, to use an example, I've managed to. There's someone that has been my boss years and years ago that always. What he did is he made strategic decisions in the last responsible moment, which obviously gave him the most information, etc. You can imagine that it didn't necessarily make a person like myself happy, but I got used to that. And over time, I actually started admiring this way of making decisions. I knew that this person will take their time and finally give me the decision, and I will accept it. At first, I was quite annoyed with the way that they've done it, but I've seen them being successful with it, and I understood how this person, throughout their years of experience, has developed this, and it was a wonderful thing. So I took it for myself. I thought to myself, okay, when do I need to make this decision? What's the real deadline? And can I afford some reflection?
Love that.
What about you,
So
Vanessa? What helps you reflect?
turning off the TV,
Mm,
like, do you know what I mean? Giving myself, like, I've really noticed that I can get into a habit of just when I come in from, when I finish work
yes.
and have my dinner, just going into automatic pilot and putting the TV on. So creating space at the end of my day, I've started to do this. I'll sit in bed and I'll go over notes that I've written
Mm-hmm.
in my journal, or, and I'll reflect on my experience of the day and honor myself. So for me, it's like creating the space and stopping doing certain things and starting doing things that are actually more helpful.
Brilliant.
Um, that's the biggest thing for me, I think, and also really paying attention to. So I'm a bit like you. I'm not a bit like you. I'm a lot like you. I can be really impatient, and I can have that. Oh, for fuck's sake, let's just get this done. Kind of like ah. And so noticing when I'm starting to feel tense,
Mm.
um, I've got that kind of red energy rising up in me.
Ah, yes.
Um, is that helpful in this moment to just drive and push or actually can I just uh, notice it and soften and just see it as a signal?
Mm.
Something's going on here. I'm reacting to something, and it's bringing up an energy in me. Is that the most useful energy for me to work with right now? Most often, it's not.
Mm.
Like, when that red energy can be super useful in certain situations where I'm like passionate, creative, but when it's in reaction, it's really unhelpful. So really trying to work with that energy and then like kind of lean more into a kind of kind relational energy,
Ah,
a
yes.
compassionate energy, which is, and soften. That's the stretch for me, for
Well,
sure.
it's a lot of description. I hope that our wonderful listeners can find throughout our examples ways that they can reflect themselves, which we always encourage. And I hope that this podcast and this episode is something that you can use to practice that.
Lovely. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Bye bye.